Good morning, everybody. How is everybody doing today? It's 21 degrees Celsius here, so it's going to be a hot day. Just chilling, having a coffee, and getting ready to start my day. On my post page, I put up a video where U.S. meets United States, and there's a reserve up there. And the First Nations people are Mohawk. It's called Akwesasne. I've been there once. Some of my kids have been there several times because it is in Ontario, and a lot of times if you go to a school on reserve, that would be that would be a school trip. That would be an option. The only thing, I wish they would have showed the video in the summertime, because in the wintertime, it's a whole different vibe. Summertime, it's pristine cottage land. It's beautiful. And there's a lot of tourists up there and cottagers up there and that type of thing. But the reason I wanted to put it up is to show you how badly this reserve has been messed with by United States and Canada, and by moving their borders. And there's a reason for that. It's because they want them gone so they can take the land. But unfortunately, they can't, because they are a sovereign nation. They're a Mohawk nation up there. So basically, they're a country within a country, like Eastern Kentucky Cherokee. Peter Satinello did a video on them. And you ought to check it out. It's absolutely beautiful. I think it's named Eastern Cherokee. Yeah. That is a country within the United States. It's not United States. And most people go all their life in Canada and United States without realizing that we have countries within our countries. We also have off our coast a island that's owned by France. You get on that ferry and go to that island, you got to use French currency. And I also want to point out what it's like being First Nations today versus what it would have been like back in the day, and how, unless you're associated with it, you're still going by what Hollywood fed us, 50, 60, 70 years ago. So one of the things I noticed, like, a lot of people have in their head that, First Nations people wear all this turquoise jewelry and all this beadwork and what else? It's just racist and ignorance is all it is. But it's not true. That's absolutely not true. And this video also explains why we have different rules than Canada or United States. It's because we're our own country. Now up there too, it's really interesting because in the wintertime, there's an ice road up there that you can go from right across the St. Lawrence River. At one time, the reserve I'm from, which is Ojibwa, you could go from Canada to United States across the river there, right above Detroit, St. Clair River, by car or walk. You can't anymore. Global warming's taken care of that. But there's a lot of things that, if you really take a look, you will see that how conditioned people are to believe separation. And that's what our governments want. That's what our governments want. And for years, First Nations people throughout Canada and throughout the world have been fighting against this because they basically want us gone, not because they care about us, it's they want our land. And up there, they've tried moving the borders. They've dumped toxic material. General Motors used to use that area to dump their toxic materials. And they're trying to build a data center up there. And what else are they doing? That's the most recent toxicity they want to put in up there. During the time of plastics dumping, it was all dumped up there. And each time, First Nations people But as you'll see around that reserve, doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs, and they fight the governments with their own laws, is what they do. And then, of course, when the casinos came in, I have to laugh because there's things in that video that they will touch on that I know about that most people wouldn't. So they talk about the period of time when casinos came in. Well, those casinos were, when they first came in, you know who came with them? Is Donald Trump. And he tried to infiltrate them. He come over to Canada. And it just ended up in an all-out war. Tribes that usually work together were fighting. They finally, one of the tribes, I think down near Windsor, allowed him to basically put his name on stuff and buy into the casino. And it ended up so bad, they ended up kicking him out of the country. Because he was such a racist piece of shit. So take a look at that video. It's interesting because it goes from 3 hours, a trip that would normally take an hour because of the border crossings and Donald Trump's bullshit, and the Canadian government is now taking up to 3 hours. So, yeah, there's that. Now let's talk about what's going on with the UFC fighting thing. And how that looked outside United States. It was an embarrassment. An absolute embarrassment. And at the end of it, or whenever that happened, that clip where that maggot came out and said that Michelle Obama is a man. As a woman that's going to be living in America, when you support that shit, you're just hurting yourselves. That's all you're doing. You're not hurting anybody but yourselves. a big difference between United States and Canada is I've noticed. Now, it could be because of the genre I was messing around in. Is women over there, over in the United States, I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them, it's almost like they put their man in a elevated position for absolutely no reason. He can be an absolute piece of shit, but he's a man. And the first thing they come out with when they're online is, I'm married. And my man, and my man, and my man the men will protect me. That's ridiculous. That is so fucking backwards. Because if you think that's reality, there's something wrong with you. Men are not. They're they're just people. They're out there doing their best like everybody else is trying to these days. They're not put on this earth to look after grown-ass women. And you guys are still living like that. And it just floors me to hear it. That to believe, to see that you're going on like that. Those days are gone. If you don't have a partner in life, then you're fucked. You're alone. It just makes life harder for you. But I believe a lot of times it is, especially in women of my generation, is they expected too much out of men. All these incel things you see all over YouTube and whatever, those are all males, predominantly American males. They hate women. You got more and more young men coming out and saying they hate women. That's a problem. So get your shit together and start doing for yourselves. As women, get your act together before you start looking for a man. And another thing that I've seen over the last 4 or 5 years that just blew me away is how much fake Christianity there is out there. You cannot be a Christian unless you practice what Christianity. It's not like, oh, I can go out there and do whatever the fuck I want, but as long as I repent, that's good. That's great. You have to live the lifestyle. You have to follow the commandments. There's so many things you have to do to be a Christian. But this is something really weird, is somewhere along the line, Christianity's just become something you say. I'm a Christian, so therefore, that makes me a good person. I'm going to heaven. Dar's sitting there drunk out of her fucking mind, talking about, I'm going to be in heaven. Okay, good luck with that, Dar. Never once has anybody asked me about the grandfather teachings. It's a lot like Christianity. It's all about giving. It's all about doing for others. And to this day, First Nations still live like that. And when we talk with 7 generations to come. So when we're talking about doing something with our land, or doing something with pollution in our areas that's being brought in, how we evaluate that in our mind is, what's it going to be like 7 generations from now if this continues? That's how far we think ahead for our children, our great grandchildren, etc. So fundamentally, we think a lot different than most than the average Christian or the average white person. Though there's a lot of Christians amongst First Nations people. And how that came about was when the churches came in and the government used the churches to put us on reserves. And they told us, our religion was no good. We were not allowed to speak our language, And because of that, and we were a lot of us very young age were put into Indian residential schools and were reprogrammed. So a lot of women, a little bit older than me, women and men became Christians. Not because they chose it. It's because because they were told that what they were was, you're a dirty Indian. You're going to burn in hell. And they were told that as little children once they were removed from their parents. So we do have a lot of Christianity, and it blends very well with the beliefs of the Creator. So you'll see in there that, and I never mentioned this before, when you have a child that's born, you bury their umbilical cord on the land. That's a big deal. You're put right back to the land. When somebody passes away, the whole thing is you put them right back to the land immediately. And that's amongst all First Nations people, all Native people. If you are really, truly in touch with who you are, then you know that once you die, there's none of this putting you in an urn and putting you on the fireplace bullshit. You go right back to the land. Because that's what First Nations people believe. You come from the land, you go back to it. So anyway, it'll talk a bit about, that video talks quite a bit about what it's like to be First Nations today, what that area is like, how our governments are still, to this day, trying to find a way to steal our land, and what we got to do to keep it, and what we go up against to keep it. So there's a part in there where it talks about an old customs office and where there was an uprising. I think it was concerning land borders. And it talks about how the government armed them with semi-automatic weapons, I think. And what the people in the area, the First Nations people in the area did was surrounded that office so that they couldn't get into it or get out of it. And the government thought that, well, eventually they got to get across the river to get food. And so we'll outdo them that way. And instead, we just bought barges and floats, and their kids up there use them to get back and forth to go to school and whatnot. And they use them, they adapt it. And almost every reserve has a story like that. The one I'm from is when they used to put the bridge up at night. That one up there is when they they cut off all their access to food, like to go to stores, to hospitals, everything. And that's not long ago. It's in the 90s. And when Donald Trump came to Canada, I believe it was in the 90s too, he stood in a court of law and said, the judge asked him like why he thought he had rights to that land. And he said, well, because they're not Indian. They don't look Indian to him. And you should see the look on that judge's face. It was funny. And that's why Donald Trump hates Canada, because his ass was kicked out. So, oh, and as far as the UFC fight goes, what an embarrassment. I mean, I don't care about the fight, but for that guy to come out and say that a First Lady of the United States looked like an animal, I think, is what he said. I don't know, but that's the clip I got. What do you think that does when other countries hear that and see that? And Donald Trump, well, he barely made it to his seat before he passed out. Anyway, I hope y'all have a great day. Don't work too hard today. Enjoy the sunshine, and I will talk to you later. Bye now.